Alright guys, so this is a video that I've actually wanted to do for a while and just haven't found the time, as no big No Man's Sky updates have come out recently and we're kind of done with Cyberpunk for the time being. And so if you don't know, essentially, and we'll talk about Battlefront 2 as well because I think that's a more known instance, right? No Man's Sky came out, had a lot of problems, everyone hated it, they fixed it however many years, 4 or 5 years it's been out, and now it's this really good game and it's better than they ever promised it was going to be. So essentially what we're going to be looking at today is how this compares to Cyberpunk. Can Cyberpunk do this? I know I've talked a lot of trash about Cyberpunk on this channel, but I mean, you know, if it can become a good game, obviously everybody wants that. That would be best case scenario. But we're going to talk about why that might be a bit different here between No Man's Sky and Battlefront 2 and all that stuff. So let's actually start with Battlefront 2 because I think that's the easier example to understand. And so Battlefront 2, when it originally released, falls into what I would call multiple times the EA problem, right? It looks good, it feels good, it plays good, but there's a lack of content, right? Everything that's there is really fun. Talked about this at least 3 or 4 times in Star Wars Squadrons as an example, right? Everything that's there is really fun, but there's not enough of it, right? And so Battlefront 2 launched with this. It had all types of just inclusion problems, I guess that you want to call it, right? There's a bunch of original trilogy stuff, the same stuff from the Battlefront 2015, but not a lot of sequel or prequel stuff, which prequel stuff is kind of what people were hoping for with this game. And now, as you know, over 4 years, however long this game's been out, they've added a bunch of new characters, new maps, new game modes, all that great stuff, both for sequels and prequels. And so I wanted to focus on this first because this is drastically different than Cyberpunk's problem. Cyberpunk 2077 has plenty of content, right? Just for one playthrough, you can spend anywhere from 30 to 60 hours on one playthrough, and then there's different playthrough, different styles, all of that stuff. There's a lot there. So I just wanted to point out Battlefront 2's problem and kind of how Cyberpunk, that's not what they need to be addressing, and No Man's Sky is more the area, the field, I guess that's what you want to call it, that Cyberpunk is in as far as redemption. And so if you like Cyberpunk, if you think the game's perfectly fine as it is, you have a high-end PC, it runs great, all that good shit, perfectly fine, good for you, keep enjoying the game, right? But for everybody else, for the other 90% of people play this game, right, the problem is partially what No Man's Sky did, and then just partially its own unique problem. And so first, let's look at what No Man's Sky did in case you don't know. Essentially, they said they're going to have all these unique planets and creatures and all of this unique gameplay stuff, kind of similar, not on the level of Cyberpunk. I would say that No Man's Sky kind of is exaggerated a bit more than Cyberpunk is, but Cyberpunk still has a lot of functions and features that are completely left out of the game and lied about, but aren't as beefed up as they said they were going to be, and that's probably due to development time. For example, your life path actually mattering at all, right? Ultimately, it doesn't make a difference in the slightest what life path you choose in this game. And just small changes like that. And so that's where it's kind of similar to No Man's Sky. And so in that regard, and you know, all of just those missing features that we were told about, right? I think that it can definitely do what No Man's Sky did in overhauling them and bringing them back and making them bigger and better over time. There are 2 problems, however, that I don't think Cyberpunk can address, and one of these is more of a personal issue that other people might have with the game and some people might not, and one I think is more of just a factual type of thing that you can't really change, and it's not CD Projekt Red's fault, but it's just the type of game that Cyberpunk is, and I guess we'll start off with that. If we look at, in this example, No Man's Sky specifically, and just look at the type of game it is, right? Exploration, the point is that you have endless possibilities. You can go discover anything. You can start over and over and over, and I certainly have, and discover something new and different, have a different path each time, right? And so that's kind of the idea, the foreground of No Man's Sky, where you can explore, do things over and over, and basically it's limitless, right? There is no end, there is no objective, it's just go explore, right? So new updates and new systems and all of that stuff gives people, players, reasons to come back and play the game because there's more stuff to do with the new updates, but there was never, they never finished the game because there really is no finishing the game. Compare this to Cyberpunk, for example, right? And yes, I mean, there's a few different side missions depending on how you play and, which life path you chose and all that stuff. You can play them out a bit differently, but let's say they add, something, not a huge story update or new missions or something, but something simple like new guns or something, right? Something similar in size to the companion update to No Man's Sky, right? Doesn't really change anything within No Man's Sky. It's not going to fundamentally change the game and add too much to do, right? You mess around with it for like 10-15 minutes and that's pretty much it, but it just adds depth to the game, right? Let's say they add new guns, Cyberpunk, okay? To everyone, unless you absolutely love the game, to everyone who's finished the game, at least in my opinion, you're not going to come back and replay, the game again to mess around with the new guns, unless they add new areas, new content, completely new stories, all of this stuff. That's the only thing that's going to bring people back. I don't think any type of graphics update, new cars, new characters, new clothing, new guns, any of that stuff is going to bring people in to play the story again. I don't think anyone, at least in my opinion, has interest in replaying what they've already played. There's no expansive, never-ending universe here that you can mess around in. It's going to be the same repetition over and over. Now, that being said, moving on to my second point, this is assuming you like the gameplay, right? If you're like me and you really don't like the gameplay, like I went in with low expectations for the gameplay, but I had to, essentially hacking was the only joy I got out of actually playing the game, right? And so if I go through and play on a different playstyle, I'm not going to enjoy anything. I don't enjoy the gunfights, right? I don't like the melee, that's not really my thing. The hacking was the only part of the game that I enjoyed. So it doesn't matter, even if they do, right, with my first point, even if they do add new parts of the map, new stories, all new expansions, but 30 hours of new missions, all stuff like that, they can't change the base gameplay, right? That's not going to happen. They're not going to rework the entire game. So for those of us that just only played the game because of the story and the few characters that were likable, right, I don't think adding that, at least in my opinion, the gameplay isn't worth coming back to that. Now, I could be wrong. They could overhaul this. It would look great, perform great, add new and fun guns, new interesting areas. Comparing it back to No Man's Sky really never made any huge updates and huge changes to its gameplay formula. It added small things here and there to add to the depth in the world and all of that stuff, but it never really changed everything. And I think that's what Cyberpunk would have to do, for me at least, to become interesting and unique and new, right? Even if they added new elements, new story, new areas of the map, new characters, the gameplay doesn't work for me. And on the flip side, even if they perfect that gameplay and make it better and improve on it, the main story that's already there isn't interesting enough for me. Wasn't even interesting the first time. I definitely will not play it again. So my point here is that they would have to drastically overhaul both the gameplay and the story in order to, improve this game to the level that I would want it to. Now, I'm not saying that's not possible. I'm just saying that it most likely isn't going to happen. I mean, they promised multiplayer, and that we haven't heard a word about that. They can't even get the single player to work. But again, that's all I have to say. Those are my quick thoughts on No Man's Sky, Cyberpunk, and all that stuff. If they do come back and have this big redemption like No Man's Sky, great, I'll play it, I'll love it, but I don't think that Cyberpunk is the type of game that has that type of lifespan, right? I don't think anyone's going to be playing this within the next year or two unless they make some drastic changes, but that's just me. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below, and I'll see you guys on the next one.